We have 4 of us, 7 council here. Kay is on her way. Al's at a closing. He is said his foot is out the door. And then Pedigo is at a 911 board meeting, which he is on his way as well. So, Dr. Tony Cox, thank you for allowing us to use your facilities. And let me just turn this over to you, and we appreciate you.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. Certainly the world is a little bit different, right, than we normally are. Like we normally get to get in and we get to get really close and we get to talk. We have gone through our first week of classes this week. It has been an adventure to get this far and get going for the semester, but we are up and rolling to getting back to sort of some normalcy even through this different times that we have here. So I just do appreciate you being here. We have our rules that we have on campus that we tell all of our students, tell all our visitors, wear your mask, wash your hands, and make sure you social distance. It's really important. You guys are leaders in our community. The more you do it, the more our students will do it, because I get it, it's a challenge for them. They've been in class all day, they're walking around, they want to, just kind of take that mask off and relax, but it's something that we're really focusing on because we want to keep this campus as safe as possible, and we want to get them through the semester with the best college experience as they possibly can. So we're glad to have you here. We really appreciate you being here. If there's anything you need, you can let our people out there know. We will try to make sure that we get you taken care of. But thank you very much for being on campus.
We really do appreciate the use of the facility. This is twice now this month that we've been able to be in here. It's really great to work with your team. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. They're a good team, and I know they try to be as accommodating as possible. So, who gets the mic? I'll hand it over.
I'll leave it up on the table.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
It's silent now. See that? Yes, all right.
I guess, Deborah, if you see that it's your second night of the show and the crowd's down, you didn't get good reviews the first night. Is that the way it works?
I guess so.
So yeah, I guess we're getting feedback on how we did at our last retreat. I'll try and get us set up and get started. Again, we are working toward a half-day presentation. The morning will be focused on our economy and kind of our budget and where we stand and where we think we're going. The afternoon will focus more on projects, particularly road projects, and give you a feel for where some of those stand and how we're going to get some of that stuff done. When we sat down putting the agenda together and arranging for speakers, we've got a lot more projects than we could get to today. And I think when we get done today, we're going to ask about what you think about the meeting format, if this is a good way to consider having one or more additional meetings like this, half-day sessions, where we're able to go through and provide some input on projects, get you up to date, and kind of get a deeper dive on some things than we can do after council meetings. Otherwise, we're going to be having a number of more lengthy council meetings following the regular meetings. So be thinking about that as we're going through whether this is working and kind of how we're getting things done. What's your pleasure? We're down to a bare quorum. Do you want to hold for a minute or two, or do you want to keep rolling? All right. Oh, there's 2 more coming in. Well, so far you've missed a warm welcome from Dr. Mixa and an introduction from me, so you're showing up with things about ready to roll.
He welcomed us as we came in.
Oh, very good. Personalized service.
We did.
We had a private
I will note that you are all now provided mics. We had some comments about the last time we met that it was a little difficult to hear across the room, so the intent is to make things work a little better. You have a microphone, please speak into it so that everyone else in the room can hear you. Again, we're going to try to spend the first half of the morning talking about the economy, our budget, kind of where we stand and some options. Then we're going to talk about projects in the remainder of the morning. So, first thing is kind of look at where we are and where we think we might be going. The plan for the morning, I've got broken up into several sections. First, we're going to review what we've done with the budget so far, what we talked about in May, what we've accomplished from that, kind of where we stand with regard to the plan we've laid out. We're going to talk about sales tax, what we're seeing so far, what the numbers are, what we think they mean. We're going to talk about economic conditions, national, state, and local, kind of give you a feel for the context we're working in. Two key policy debates that we expect to have this morning involve the hiring freeze and the salary study that we had a report last spring. I'm going to lay all that out with a couple of recommendations from where I see it. We'll talk about a little bit of kind of strategizing what if, what might happen, where can we go, and then we've got an adequate time, hopefully planned, where council can have some conversation among yourselves, arrive at a consensus on where we are and where we need to go. So, with that, we'll start with a review of what we did beginning in the spring, particularly in May, to look at adopting the budget for the year we're in today, the fiscal year 21 budget. You'll recall we talked about that this was a budget year that's going to require power. And if you're really taking notes, you would recall that the P was for patience. We're going to need to exercise some patience. We're not going to be able to do some things that we would like to do as soon as we would like to do. And that we're going to have to be patient as we go through this somewhat uncertain year. Now, I think that Bob and Kay were there the day that I interviewed for this position. And one of the questions was, what is a personal weakness? And I believe that I said that patience is one of those shortcomings. I have the patience of a 7-year-old on Christmas morning wanting to see a Santa brought the rock and sock and robots and put it in the tree. But it's one of those things that we're going to have to work through and make sure that we've got patience in order to let things develop where we can take action. O was for observation. We needed to watch and see how things were developing. We needed to monitor changes. And there was some conversation in May about, whether waiting to a quarter was too long. And I think I had a quizzical look on my face because I knew we'd be monitoring all along. And from the reports you receive every Friday, we've been covering you up with data about the local economy, sales, and the environment we're working through. We've been trying to give you enough background information on a weekly basis to set you up to be able to talk today from a meaningful perspective. We said we're going to have to work, have to make some tough decisions, roll up our sleeves, and make some things that are not always going to be easy to do. It's going to be difficult to work through. We needed to make sure that our local economy was a priority, that we were growing our way out of the problem, and that we were making sure that that's our long-term survival. And then finally, resilience. We're going to have to be able to take a couple of blows, get up, dust ourselves off, and get back to work. This is not an easy process. It's not been an easy process. As Dr. Mixes said, we're dealing with changes on a regular basis. Things don't look like they did yesterday. They won't look the same tomorrow. So rolling with some punches is part of the game plan, part of the formula. So overall, we talked about the idea that the power was the foundation of what we're going to be doing to manage this year's finances. We talked about a phased plan, that we would adopt a budget that was established where we could monitor and modify as we went through. So we talked about at least quarterly meetings. The council said that we really wanted to meet earlier than that and scheduled this meeting today for that very purpose. So we anticipate moving forward a series of meetings to try and keep you up to date on what's going on and decisions that will be made and adjustments made through the course of the year. Now, going back to what we adopted in May, we had a number of proposals that we put in place suggesting this is how we're going to manage through the year. The first was that we were going to adopt the certified tax rate from the reassessment. We were not going to raise taxes, even an effective tax rate, by maintaining the tax rate. So we have adopted on 2 readings a property tax rate of 1.3958 per hundred. That value has been sent to the state. We are certified, we are ready to go. As a benchmark, looking at what we've got there, before the reassessment, 1 penny on the tax rate generated about $87,500. With the reassessment and the reduced tax rate to generate the same amount of revenue, we now are at $93,853. So per penny, the amount of revenue generated increased with the reassessment. We rolled the rate back so we get a flat amount of revenue. This rate has been adopted, it is in place. We also said that we would change the due date for payment of taxes. Had we not done that, taxes would already be out there in front of people to be paid. Instead, we rolled them back to October with a penalty due date of February. We are currently working on preparing the bills in the digest, expect to see them go out next month for payments to begin in October. That gave owners a little more time to adjust to the conditions and also align our process with that of the Hamlin County's calendar. We talked about the need with the shortfalls that we were seeing with the budget of using one-time revenue. That's an unusual situation. You will recall you have a policy that you don't use one-time money for ongoing expenses. And what we did, we used it for capital and paving. The budget we're operating under today has a $2 million hole in it, if you will. We use $692,000 from the state to pave streets. Paving is going on now. We also dipped into your fund balance for $1.2 million for the purchase of capital equipment. That's patrol cars, pickup trucks, basically rolling stock from the general fund that we put on the street to make sure that our people have the tools they need to be able to do the job. But the problem is that is one-time money. We have a situation where if we fast forward to May and things don't change, we don't have that one-time money anymore. And we're facing a dilemma on how we pave streets and how we replace our equipment. The fourth proposal we put in place was to implement the recommendations from Mark III, your benefit consultant, and that was not to change the premiums for health insurance. We also, at the same time, recognized it was going to be difficult for people to get out and get their blood work done, get their health assessment taken care of. So we gave the health assessment discount to every employee, regardless of whether or not they got the AHA completed. We completed the open enrollment process in May. Everyone has gone through making the changes that they need to in the coverage for their family and changes the circumstances. Premiums did not change, and everyone gets the discount. The fifth proposal we put forward with the budget is to implement a hiring freeze. We said we'd evaluate positions on a case-by-case basis and fill them as was absolutely necessary. We said that we'd come back at least on a quarterly basis to evaluate that situation and make adjustments. And that is one of the big things at the end of the day, or at the end of this presentation. We're going to get some feedback from you in terms of where we are and where we're going. So that is one of the big points that we're going to try and get some guidance from council. The sixth proposal was that we put the salary study recommendations on hold. That is, that we would not be able to implement the recommendations we received last March, and that we would review at the mid-year retreat. Council, again, took exception to that, was more optimistic than the budget presentation, and said we need to evaluate that, we need to do so, and we'll do so at today's meeting. So again, that is a discussion point for today's conversation. So that's kind of the roadmap we laid out and kind of what we've done. We've not been sitting idly by. Things are getting accomplished and moving forward. Let's talk for a minute about sales tax. I know that Bob had a story in the paper, I guess it was a week ago, about sales tax and the amount of growth in sales tax. And we talked about in the budget the projected decline in sales tax. So we want to do a little bit of discussion about where we are, where we stand with regard to sales tax receipts. Now, I apologize. Some of these charts are going to be a little difficult to see, but I'm going to try and walk you through it. This is 3 years of sales tax receipts from local option sales tax. The blue line is from 2 years ago. And you can see our normal pattern of sales tax is it's fairly flat. We get a Christmas spike and then it comes off. So it is not flat per month per year. The orange line is last year, the year we just ended in June. And you can see that in every month except for the Christmas bump, we exceeded the prior year. The little line is the 2 months here, this purple line, the first 2 months that we've seen this year. And you can see it is higher than what we had last year. It's declined a little bit. We're going to talk about, yes, in fact, there is more sales tax coming in than we anticipated, more than we had last year. Why is that? Turning to state sales tax. Local option sales tax is based on sales made within our jurisdiction. State shared sales tax is collected statewide and spread based on the population basis. So this is more a picture statewide on where sales tax is. Again, 3 years. The blue line is 2 years ago. We see the dip and spike that's traditional with the sales tax across the state being the Christmas bonus that when everybody gets out and buys hopefully buys those Rock'em Sock'em robots to go under the Christmas tree. And you can see here again the purple line for sales tax collections across the state have increased year over year. To get that kind of jump from the state is unusual. You can see that the normal margin of growth is relatively small. That's a significant number. So how does that compare locally? This is local option sales tax for the month of August. The most recent month we collected last year in the gold orange bar, and the blue bar is what we collected this year. Let's look at the sales tax for this month. In the year we closed out in June, budget versus actual. We were a little conservative, got a little bit more. The budget we proposed and adopted reflected a reduction of 10% in the budget year we're in. And in fact, collections year to date for the first 2 months are up. So we're not seeing the decline that we projected at this point in time. In fact, if you look at prorated sales tax compared to what we've got, we're about $485,000 ahead year to date on local option sales tax. Now, not that it's critical for today, but it's very important for our long-term understanding of sales tax. I want to talk for a minute about internet sales, the fact that they're now taxable, and the way the state allocates those sales. You may recall we talked about this for a couple of years now, where the state allocates sales tax from internet sales based on the place that it's ordered from and delivered to. So as our brick and mortar stores we traditionally had lose sales to internet salespeople, those sales tax are going to the surrounding jurisdictions where those customers reside. And when you look at a map statewide, this map shows sales tax collections for last month, and the color coding is the darkest blue is down more than 20%. The lighter shade of blue is up to 20% down, flat to up 20%, 20 to 40, and more than 40. Look across the state, there are 2 counties across the state this year that have seen a decline in sales tax. It's somewhat interesting as we look a little closer into our region. You can see here Hamlin County, if I can get my cursor, Hamlin County is up 19%. Morristown, the city, is up 7%. But look at our traditional customer base around us, the rural counties that have traditionally driven into town to shop here. They're all up more than 20%. Granger is up 42% sales tax revenue compared to last year. This shows that those people that were shopping in Morristown, and we were able to support a local store, local employees, a local business, and generate local sales tax, is now doing much more shopping, clicking a mouse, buying on the internet, getting it shipped to their front door, and the taxes are going to their home county. If you take some time and look across the state, you're going to find that pattern is replicated across the state. For every urban area, Tri-Cities, the surrounding rural areas have grown much more than the place that has the brick and mortar stores. Long term, that means we've got a bleed of sales tax revenue we've been counting on for a number of years to do our normal operations, our economic development, all the things we do, is going to those surrounding counties. Okay. You think it's bad now, I want to get even more into the classroom setting, if you will, and talk about economic conditions. And we're going to talk about national trends, state and local trends. Those of you who are closely follow the National League of Cities will know that they recently put out their annual fiscal conditions report for communities across the nation. They had a big rollout, they had a webinar talking about the trends, and they produced a report. If you've not seen it, it's available on their website. Of course, they are talking across the nation, but they did an analysis, and I apologize again, this is hard to read, but we'll walk through it. They did an analysis of major sources of revenue for local governments across the nation. And if you look, let me make sure, yes, the green line is income tax. In the state of Tennessee, that's not available to either the state or localities, but it tends to fluctuate over time with the economy. Recessions, such as we see here with the 2001 recession, tend to slide down and they lose income from income tax. If you look at the blue line, that represents property taxes. And as you go through, you see generally property taxes are pretty predictable and stable. It did decline significantly during the 2008 Great Recession with the housing bubble burst and all the foreclosures. But overall, property taxes, which is one of our two big sources of revenue for the city, has been fairly stable across the nation in most circumstances. The one we need to pay attention to today is the purple line. The purple line represents sales tax revenue. And you can see that there are good years and there are bad years. So in the 2001 recession, sales tax decline recovered. The Great Recession, 2008, 2010, another huge decline, recovered. And then this is a reflection of national sales tax this year. It's taking a huge historic decline nationwide as we look at sales tax and where they're going. So the National League of Cities was trying to help communities understand where we are and what we're facing here. And they did an analysis of what it takes to recover from a recession. And in this graph, across the top is the number of years from the beginning of the recession, and down this axis is the amount of decrease in revenues. So when you walk through, the blue line here is the 2001 recession. It took communities across the nation about 5 years to get back to where they were before the recession. The green line, the next recession, this is the 1990, this is the 2001 recession, it's the green line. The purple line is the Great Recession. That's the one we just came out of fighting, that when I came to town we were dealing with. And you can see there's a deep cut in terms of revenues, and it took more than a dozen years for communities on average to get back to where they were. When you look at the slope of the curve for the current recession, and you're going to see this with other graphs that we have throughout this presentation, it's deeper, steeper, and more difficult. So the question becomes, not only how much did you lose, but how long does it take you to dig out of the hole? Now, I know this is nationwide. We say, well, we're not California, we're not New York. Let's take a look at Morristown. When you look at sales tax revenue, you can see that it does indeed ebb and flow with the national economy. We took a dip during the 2001 recession. We recovered. When the Great Recession started, we had a dip. This is an anomaly in that that's the time we had the referendum to change the rate. So with the rate, we had an increase. If you adjust for that, our dip for the sales in the community took us about 8 years to dig back out. We're not going to be able to adjust sales tax rates again. So you can see, we expect, much like you see nationwide, with sales tax in particular, we're going to see sags with the recession. The length and magnitude depends upon the national conditions. There's been a great deal of debate among economists and people trying to analyze what's going on. And there are many people that talked about a V-shaped recovery. That is, we were going along, we closed down businesses, things crashed, we know that's going to happen. There were many people that said we were going to reopen and bounce right back to where we were. Short, deep cut in terms of what we saw. That is not what we're seeing with the figures today. We did in fact see a significant recovery from the worst days when things were shut down. But what we're seeing is that once we do that, the overall economy is still struggling to get its feet under it. So what the prediction here, and this graph comes from Moody's, the people that rate our bonds and analyze local financial stability across the nation. They are seeing that we're going to slowly grow out during the period we're looking for a cure, trying to get the pandemic resolved and under control. And then after that, it's going to take an additional amount of time to get back on our feet, back to where we were. Moody's sees another 18 to 24 months before that recovery takes place. Much, much better than what we have seen in some cases, but it's still 2 years. So when you look at that and you say, what's that do for us? How do we plan? you've seen this chart, I update it every week in the Friday report. This comes from the Federal Reserve, national economists provide a weekly economic index of how they feel that the economy's trending. They take those numbers, that's what the Federal Reserve uses to manage our banks and our money. The relative number, the number itself, the index number is not really important, but the overall trend is. You can see here, this is the period of time during the Great Recession. The economists saw a significant sag in the growth, and they saw the economy recovering. We were bopping along for several years, and this is the current recession. As it stands now, in the worst days when they first started taking this review from folks, they were projecting 11.5 on this scale. It has now recovered significantly, and now they've got it up to 5.73. That's a big improvement over where it was. But bear in mind, even at 5.73, that's worse than the worst days of the last recession. The last recession, this index got down to 4. So what we're seeing is from the national economic economists, bankers, they're saying that we still got a significant blow that we're trying to absorb, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. We've got to recognize and understand that we are part of a global economy. That, like it or not, we're all interconnected, and that if there are other parts of the nation and the globe that are having problems, we've got problems. Let's try a little bit to get that closer to home. 2 headlines from this week's newspapers. Delta's getting ready to lay off 2,000 pilots. They're getting ready to do that in October because the federal subsidies they've been receiving are about to dry up. American Airlines, a competitor, is about ready to cut the same period for the same reason, 19,000 jobs. When you look across the traveling public, Americans already cutting many cities off of where they travel, and they're parking airplanes. You will find these great fields of airlines sitting idle across the nation in areas where they can adequately store aircraft. And you say to yourself, well, that doesn't mean anything. I don't run an airline. We don't have passenger service. But our iconic Howmet. Howmet makes the little cores inside the jet turbines that are inside those jet engines that are on those jet planes. The second quarter, Arconic, sales were down $1.2 billion, down 38% year over year. For the quarter, they were down 18 times more than the profit last year. When you look at their earnings before interest and taxes, one of the metrics that people use to judge the financial stability of folks when making investments, they're down 55%. This is a company here in town. Now, clearly, they're a global company. They have many more product lines than just the cores they make here, and they've got other factors into this, but that's home. These are people in Morristown that are going to work, that their company is hemorrhaging funds because of the global economy. So it is something that impacts us locally whenever you start to look at the impacts out in the bigger, wider world. Not to be completely doom and gloom, when you look at Moody's Analytics and look at their projection for how hard it's going to hit and how quickly the communities will recover, this is a map of metropolitan statistical areas, significant metro areas across the nation. Morris County is an MSA, and they rank them on an index of red is the worst, orange a little better, light green, and green. You can see that retirement communities like out here in the west, the West Coast, petrochemicals, tourism, and the eastern seaboard are getting slammed. Those are the ones taking the worst of the hit. If you zoom in real close and you have good eyesight, you'll see here in East Tennessee. East Tennessee, we've got metropolitan statistical areas in Knoxville, Tri-Cities, and little old Morristown. And each of us, all three, are falling in this category of not the best, but nowhere near the worst in terms of how hard it's going to hit us and how quickly we can get out. So the message here is, it's bad, we don't know how bad it is, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel for Morristown in terms of how we're looking to move forward. Now, zeroing in on what little data we have, actual looking at local markets, and there's some information I've been sending to you every Friday. You should be familiar with a lot of this. We can start to get a picture of what's going on inside Morristown and Hamlin County. This graph that you see every week measures movement from Google based on where these little phones are. Good folks at Google know we're sitting in this room. As a matter of fact, so there's a good chance that some of us will get a message as you leave asking you to rate the facility of Walter State. But if you look at where we are compared to January, retail has been up and down, had some spikes, but at our last week's report was down 12%. Movement of people to stores in Hamlin County was down 12% last week compared to January. Grocery stores have been up and down. We've had spikes, we've had valleys, but overall it's been relatively close to the standard we've seen in January. But the one that is most telling is travel to workplaces. And you can see it's been up and down. It tends to have a somewhat cyclical review during the month, but we've never gotten back to where we were in January. Last week's report, even though we're on an upward trend, was that we were down 8% compared to the baseline. The message is that people in Hamlin County still are not back at work. We're going to see a lot of that information as we go through some of the other slides. Unemployment figures for the state of Tennessee for the month of July, the most recent month, just came out, 9.5%. This graph shows two things. The blue line is new people who have applied for unemployment. And you can see when we had the shutdown and we've had the stay-at-home order, a huge spike, record-setting, broke the system. It has declined over time, but we still see a significant number of new people making applications for unemployment. The orange line is cumulative. That represents for that week how many people all told we're cutting checks to for unemployment. And again, you can see after the big spike, we hit a record number, and it has been improving, but we still got well over 200,000 unemployed people in the state of Tennessee. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about why that is a little later, but part of that is the incentive from the federal government to be unemployed, the extra $600 check that you receive as a bonus during the stimulus times. When you compare this graph, the blue line is the Tennessee, orange is the nation. Overall, the state's unemployment trend has followed the nation. As we go through, we see a big spike with the shutdowns. We're a little bit better than the national number, but we tend to track pretty well close to where we have seen nation and state. Locally, they're a little slower getting the numbers. I believe that the Morristown, Hamlin County numbers will come out today. I believe that was the last report I saw. So this is for June. Morristown unemployment in our workforce metropolitan statistical area, 9.4%. Within just the city, you got them? What do you got, Bob? Great, I can't read from
Hamlin is down 3/10 from 9/1 to 8/8.
Okay, 8/8 for the county. So, we're in that 9% range of unemployment in our community, in our workforce, and the folks that come here to work every day. When you compare that to historical trends, this is a slide where blue's the Morristown, orange is Tennessee, and green is the U.S. You see the spike that we all had during the Great Recession. That's this. Even though these reflect last month's numbers, they're down from the spike numbers, the biggest numbers we've had. They're still very comparable to the worst we were seeing during the Great Recession. So we know we've got significant unemployment through our community today. What does that mean for our local economy? This graph has been in your report every Friday, and on this one, the dark blue line represents Hamlin County, the gray line represents the state. And unfortunately, they stopped taking this metric for localities in June, so this only goes to June. But you can see this is changing earnings for low-income workers. Low income for this is defined as $20,000. And you can see that earnings during this period have been down 39% in Hamlin County. So the question becomes, how are we having higher sales tax and lower earnings? We're going to begin to see a better picture when we look at consumer spending. Again, this is from the Opportunity Trends site that's put together by Harvard and Brown with funding from Gates Foundation. This starts, again, the dark blue line is Hamlin County, the gray is the state of Tennessee, to give you a frame of reference. Starting in January, when we started dealing with this mess, then you can kind of see some ups and downs. Let's run out and buy toilet paper, let's have a panic run on things, let's watch the news. And you can see things are up and down. But consumer spending was relatively within a tight range. Then we started shutting things down. Stay-at-home order, things went down. They stayed down. What happened here? Big spike in spending in Hamlin County and the state of Tennessee. That's April 15th. That's when the federal government started sending out $1,200 stimulus checks to every individual across the nation. So this spike is from your one-time check from the federal government. During this period of time, as we begin to reopen, you can see that we're coming along pretty well, but we just saw that we had significant unemployment and that we were still having this higher spending. Why would that be? Well, we know that unemployment received a base check of, what, $275, and they're getting a $600 additional payment from the federal government. That equates to $20 an hour. When you are a low-income worker and you can work for minimum wage or you can stay unemployed for 20, there's been an incentive to stay unemployed. And we have seen when we look around our community, places like Home Depot, Lowe's, and those kinds of places, they're spending. They're taking that extra money and they're putting it back. But when we started to get to here, this is July 1st, and the news started coming out that that money was going to have a sunset. The federal government couldn't agree on what we were going to do with this additional stimulus. You can see it began to decline to where by the time we get to the first week of August, we are down dramatically. Now, it remains to be seen what happens with Washington and Governor Lee and trying to provide additional stimulus to unemployed folks. But I contend that this spending that's been keeping us alive comes from the federal government. To support that contention, let's look at this slide from the Federal Reserve Board. This is the amount of transfer payments to individuals as benefits. And it goes back from the 90s, Great Recession. This is where we were when the pandemic started. Pumped more than $2 trillion in money from the U.S. government to individuals. And you begin to see where the money's coming from that we're seeing in town. In fact, the U.S. Mint's printing some money they're hauling out in dump trucks. I mean, we're talking about throw everything at it that we possibly can. So the question becomes, how long can that be sustained? Is that something that we can utilize for long-term planning? This is another of the charts from the Opportunity Trends folks, showing, again, the dark blue line is Hamlin County, the gray line is the state of Tennessee. Starting in January, and it's showing the change in revenues for small businesses in our community. This is the period where we were all running out and buying hand sanitizers, toilet paper, let's hoard everything we can. It's a panic buy. Then, as we went through and we started having worse news and stay-at-home orders, local revenue and small businesses went down dramatically. People recovered a little bit, and the big recovery, of course, is when we open back up. But again, look what happens when we get close to the end of the extra $600 a week unemployment. Suddenly, although we've been running right along with the state and we've been doing well, we're down to where small businesses are seeing 20% decline in revenue. That spending has been something that is artificial and temporary. So, I was fumbling on trying to explain this. We're trying to figure out how we're going to deal with these numbers, and everything is complex and doesn't make a lot of sense. And I stumbled across a news article this week from Dr. Bill Fox. You will remember back in May when we talked about the budget, I talked about Dr. Matt Murray. He and Dr. Fox are the two that run the Boyd Center at UT. They are the ones that prepare the annual report for the state, for the governor, in the preparation of their annual budget. The Tennessean had an interview with Dr. Fox and was trying to get him to help them make sense of it and what he was telling the state in terms of what they should be doing in this environment. And I apologize, the next several slides are wordy. It's not intended to read every word, and I'll provide you with a PDF of this after we're done. But Dr. Fox said, my advice to the state is to be conservative, because we can't keep spending like we have been spending by the federal government. They simply can't keep pumping that kind of money into the economy. This recession, his projection was off. We used their projections significantly, and it said that largely it's because the federal money has come in, it has changed the way people spend, and they didn't see what they expected. What people did was they took that extra money from the stimulus checks, from the unemployment surplus, and they went out and bought things. We've seen it at Home Depot, we've seen it at Lowe's, we've seen it at those home improvement things. Go out and try and buy a TV in this market, they're gone. Those checks have gone out and they've been spent for those one-time splurges because people were sitting home bored, they had the extra money, and they got spent in the economy. So we went back we cut back on restaurants, but we did more things like bicycles, kayaks and televisions. It's the $1,200 check, according to Dr. Fox, that's been driving all this. Dr. Fox says the decline is still coming. He believes it won't be as dramatic, as bad as he thought it was going to be, but it is still coming. The article turned to the finance commissioner for the state, and he said his advice to those in the legislature and in the governor's mansion, that this is not the time to start spending dollars. We're not sure we're going to have them. We can adjust things, but once you start making decisions based on artificial one-time money, you put yourself out there. Dr. Fox says, he says the revenue is still going to be less this year than last. Only 5 months in, we are not sure what the next 6 months is going to be. It could be much worse or it could be better. But he points out that once you spend it, you can't unspend it. Once we get to January, February, we'll have a much better idea of where we are. But right now, their recommendation is sit tight. You don't know what you've got for the long term based on the federal spending that's been happening so far. The message is, we're not really certain where we're headed, where we are, and where we're going to go. One painful certainty is the solution is going to come from these people. Those three people in their negotiations in Washington is what pumped money in. Do you think these three people are going to set aside their personal differences, their political interests, their own axe to grind, to work for the good of the country and get things resolved? Or do you believe, as I do, that they're much more interested in setting up conditions for this matchup? I think that we've got some real concerns about our national leadership, their current motivations, and what that means for the local economy. It makes it extremely difficult to set forward long-term plans based on where we've been. So again, we're looking at uncertainty moving forward. All right, enough soapbox from Tony. Let's get to the policy issues that are before you today. The hiring freeze and the salary study.
First thing I think we need to see is show our appreciation to you for being so optimistic.
Yes, that's right, yeah. That's, I work on that every morning.
Microphone is live, if you see the community down there.
All right. Hiring freeze. What we said in our current policy is we're not going to fill positions when they come open. We're going to analyze them on a case-by-case basis. We have made exceptions to that policy with regard to fire. We decided we might put Clark in position in the fire chief's position, and a couple of folks moved up to fill those positions. But that's the only folks that we've filled openings since we've put the hiring freeze in place. Today, we have at least 15, and I keep trying to get a weekly report. Sometimes this is out of date by a couple, but 15 vacant positions. These are full-time permanent positions that are vacant. Real quickly, reception and administration, 2 cashiers, public works has got a crew leader, heavy equipment operator, and a mechanic. Police, big winner, 7. Administrative secretary, accreditation, I think we've actually moved a patrol officer into accreditation, so it would be, that one would be filled and an officer would be, so it would be 4 officers, a lieutenant and a sergeant. Fire's got a lieutenant's position open, and our code enforcement officer left us, what, a week ago today? So right now we have 15 positions that are being frozen. We saw in March the report from Austin Peters and their recommendations based on their study of the pay plan. And the 2 big things that came out of that are they recommended that we make some adjustments to pay ranges and adjustments for compression that largely impact police, a little bit in fire. Most of the other ones weren't out in terms of that, but they did recommend, in addition to that, that we look at an across-the-board cost of living increase to keep ourselves competitive with the market. So there are two pieces. One is make adjustments to pay ranges and compression. And I believe in police, on average, it was about 5%. But bear in mind, that's on average. That's not every individual. There'll be some in the police department will have as low as 1, and some will have double-digit adjustments. And then a little bit in fire and very little elsewhere. So what does that cost? This is the cost of a 2% cost of living adjustment across the board. Now, it impacts your 4 operating funds, but the total is $351,000. This is an annual cost. This assumes that you go back retroactive to July 1. If you implement the adjustments to ranges and compression that largely impact police and a little bit of fire, that you said very much all in the general fund, it's a cost of $367,516. If you want to do what the salary study recommended and do both, the total cost, because there's some compounding, it's not just adding the two together, it's $726,000, $355. $726,355.
Does that include all the benefits that go with that, like Social Security, et cetera?
Yes, this has all the related FICA costs and the retirement costs and those things. So, you pay me to stand up here, wave my arms, and be an optimist, and I make recommendations. My first recommendation, in terms of where we stand today, is to follow the freeze. We are getting to the point where we're getting some stress on our systems with vacancies, and even the people who are employed are running into being quarantined in isolation, and we're getting some stress on departments across the board. So my recommendation is to begin to slowly fill those positions. To move forward, and I think Civil Service is already working on developing entry-level rosters for police and fire. We need to have those rosters of people ready when the schools come open, assuming there are training academies for rookie school and fire and police. We want to be ready to backfill those positions as they become available. And then begin recruiting and selection of their things as we can accommodate it. Now bear in mind, hiring that many people at once is a burden on an HR department that is already burdened with trying to deal with COVID, implementing the Brady Act, changing all the rules that come out on a regular basis, the regular processing of disciplinary actions, and the other things that HR has to do. This lump of people won't go through in a day's time. It will take some time. We'll still have to make some priorities. We'll have to figure out how we schedule and conduct interviews in this environment. But I think it's something we need to begin to do to kind of relieve that logjam. So that's my first recommendation. The second one is tougher. That is the salary study. I'm still not comfortable at this point in time, given what we've just gone through with the uncertainty of how much money we're really going to get long-term, to pull the trigger on the salary study. I originally recommended that we look at this mid-year, and I still think that's the way to go. I believe, as Dr. Fox said, by mid-year we'll know a lot more about where we stand and we can make better decisions. My recommendation to you today is, as much as it hurts, as much as we'd like to do what we want to do, there's no question the salary study proves that it's a valid thing. We should do it. They've earned it. They deserve it. They should get it. What I don't want to do is get in a position where we can't pay the bills. And that's where I am. So Tommy, yes, I know. I'm not the world's best optimist when it comes to looking at these things. And I don't know if y'all, I'm a huge fan of Will Abner. I don't know if y'all followed that, but I went back and read a lot of the old strips from Little Adner. And I don't know if you remember Joe from the strip, but Joe was the guy who wandered around in the community of Dog Patch and had a little cloud always over his head. He was always bringing on his local jinx. I understand that's what I look like up here waving my arms, but I think that from where I stand, what I believe that I know, and the assumptions we're making, that's the best recommendation. However, I know that you're sitting there saying that's not what I want to do. So let's take a look at what you need to do if you want to move forward with implementation. If you want to do it now, you've got to amend your budget, and you have to offset expenses with revenues. The easiest way to do it is say, Tony, your projections are off, and we want to adjust those to where we think they're going to be. If you want to just give a 2% cost of living across the board to every employee, you would need to increase your sales tax projections by 3%. If you want to just do the pay range and compression adjustments, that would be about 3%. If you want to do what they recommended, both pieces in the salary study, that's 6% increase in the projections for sales tax. That's a vote, 2 votes in the council chambers for reading, second reading, and we can put this in place. However, just to give you a feel for the gamble you're taking and what you're really putting on the line, if you do that and the projections in the budget are about right, come next budget year, when it comes time to pay for the pay that we've already put in place, I'm assuming that you're not going to cut pay if the money's not there, that you're going to have to find a way to fund it. To give you a feel based on that penny per property tax that we talked about earlier, 3.73 cents would be necessary to raise taxes for the cost of living. The salary increase alone is about 4 cents. If you do both, it's a little more, it's almost 8 cents. Again, there's other ways to skin that cat. You can cut other expenses, you can lay off people, you can do other things. This is the frame of reference to give you an idea of the magnitude of the dollars we're talking about. Also, you need to be aware of that $2 million hole in your budget. If you move forward with implementing pay at this time, and the revenues don't come, and we don't have one-time revenue from the governor and the White House, you have to raise taxes to pay for the pay, and you still don't have money to pave streets. And the $1.2 million we did out of fund balance for patrol cars, pickup trucks, and equipment to do the job won't be there. So you wouldn't be able to replace your rolling stock, you wouldn't be able to pave streets. That is kind of give you a framework of reference for the discussion we need to now have. I know, we all know, that if 2020 were on the Yelp review, we would get very low ratings. This has been a heck of a year, and it has been one that none of us has wanted to deal with the things that have come to us. And I think we're all standing here saying, what next? How do we deal with this stuff, make good decisions, do the right thing for our community, and move forward? So, what we need to do today is I need to stop, that you all speak up, and we need some consensus from council on what you want to do today moving forward with regard to projecting revenues and adjusting your overall personnel management. This is why you all have microphones in front of you today.
I personally think that we can discuss it. I also believe that to come to even a consensus today is not, for me, a reality. I need more time to think about this because it's a lot. It's like a shotgun. It's just been fired with a lot of information and consequences, whichever way you go. Not just and responsibility, maybe more than consequences, but it is. I think there are unintended consequences that we do need to consider. consider there, but for me, I can't give you a consensus or of any time today, but I'm willing to listen.
Well, let's divide, there are two issues in front of you. Hiring freeze. Anyone got problems with dropping the hiring freeze, thawing that, beginning to move forward with filling the vacant positions that we have now?
I'd like to tell you, I'm not making any decision.
Yeah, we still got to vote no matter what we do.
The bond that has been dropped, take a while.
On hiring freeze.
Go ahead, Gary.
No. I was just gonna ask on the chart that you gave us for the hiring freeze, that does not include the, is that everything or is that just positions now? That's not the new people that need to come into the police department. That's not the positions that are not filled, or is that every position?
That's every vacant position that I have.
And in the fire, the only one is the lieutenant?
Lieutenant's all we got?
That will create the down.
Right, you promote somebody to lieutenant, you could do a driver, and then so, yeah, that cascades through, but still one new person.
Okay, so we don't need, I just need to make sure police and fire don't need, there are not any first entry-level positions open at this point.
At this point, police has got, let me go back to
Three.
it, 4, if we move one into accreditation, there's 4 entry levels, a sergeant and lieutenant. Am I counting right? Let me go back.
We would have to fill our staffing level, we would currently have to hire 6 police officers and 1 secretary.
But that would cover it right there, those numbers.
Yes.
I
No. Those 6 police officers would be 7.
Yeah, you got accreditation, still got an accreditation, that moves down to police officers, so there's 4 patrol officers, a sergeant, lieutenant.
Well, let me clarify, I can go on the hiring, but it's the other decision about, where we go on the salary study and so forth like that. Chris, I'm through.
She done?
Well, I mean, I don't know about all the departments, but it's not gonna take you long. Police department paying out overtime pay for basically, if you do steps on that sergeant. Somebody's gonna move up there, lieutenant, somebody's gonna move up. You're talking about 5,
6.
6.
Because we're moving the patrol officer into accreditation, that was civilian.
Right, so that's 6. The administrative assistants will be, not a gun carrying person, correct?
Not unless you got a carry permit.
That, I mean, it's not gonna take you long paying out overtime pay, where you could hire some people, I would think. What is your overtime right now, Chief?
Probably around $30 an hour.
So, to me, Roger needs reinforcements, and we need to have them ready to go. Paul needs crew leaders and, equipment operators. If we're gonna get the work done, we need people out there. We were afraid the bottoms were falling out, and we can do this right away. I feel comfortable enough in the long term that things are not gonna be as bad as we first projected, that we can take this step, and it's not a big gamble.
Well, like some of these departments, you just hired a second code enforcement person not long ago. I don't know if it's been, but if you take that one person back out of it, I mean, sure, they're gonna be able to do the code enforcement, but they're not gonna do it in a timely fashion like Joe Public calls in and says, I ain't just gonna look at it. I thought you 10 days ago about this.
What our game plan for code enforcement would be, and Steve can speak up, but that's one of those things, timing wise. We would like to have a code enforcement person on this winter to train and be ready to go by the time grass growing season hits us in the teeth next year. Doesn't have to be today, but you gotta start the ball rolling, and some of these other positions, mechanics on keeping the fleet going, we need some of those things going. Like I said, 6 set of officers is a pretty good chunk of his work.
It really is. I don't know what percentage that is. We can probably talk to
What do you got?
80%.
80?
Page 6. But you have to factor in also, I currently have 3 people on extended family medical leave. I have a guy that's deployed to the military for 1 year. On top of this, I have those vacancies too. We basically have a platoon that's completely gone.
Right.
It looks like we've got, what, about 485,000 in, let's call it soft money that we didn't expect to get, and we can thank the folks in Washington for that. How do we use it? I'm okay with following the freeze, as you call it, to get some things going. That could be our benefit from that money. That helps out some departments, especially the police department. I think if there's one area we don't want to be behind is in law enforcement and public safety. That might be our greatest calling as taxpayers. But if we've got that money to use and allows the following of that freeze, I'd be okay with doing that. But, and also looking to see what we get on the other side of November 3rd. I do agree there'll be some things different when we decide to get past all of the rhetoric of the presidential campaign that we're about to be flooded with in the next 6 weeks. I'm personally more comfortable with your recommendations on that as well.
All right, does anybody have heartburn about moving forward with filling those positions? Removing the freeze? We can start doing that, we can slowly begin to get that process. It takes a while to get ramped up, cranked up. I'm seeing, nobody saying, no, throw them out of the room. Everybody's okay with that?
Have you given us an expense of implementing the hiring, taking
No,
off the
I
hiring?
have not, because all those people came off at different times. Like I said, the code enforcement officer's been gone for a week. Some of those patrol officers were vacant the day we adopted the budget. So it's across the board for those different positions. Roger, you've been without an administrative assistant for many months.
It's early February.
It's already February.
But that money is in the budget
That money is in the budget.
to cover them completely.
To cut that, yeah, with the revenue assumptions we have, yes, we should be able to cover that, and I think we're in a reasonable position to do that. I'm not worried about the money filling those positions.
That was my question, Marty. Is that money is already in the budget to fill these positions? I mean, they were filled when the
Right.
budget was set.
They were funded the day we adopted the budget. It was Tony being afraid that we hadn't been conservative enough to hold on to that just in case. I'm saying today, I'm a little more comfortable with the just in case to go ahead and let them go.
Am I understanding you to say that the, and I'm skipping forward here, I guess. Am I understanding you to say that the 3% increase would cover the cost of living, 400 and something thousand?
A 3% adjustment in projection of sales tax, if it comes through, would pay for a 2% across the board cost of living increase for every employee.
For the year?
For the whole year, retroactive to July 1.
Well, why wouldn't we at some time consider the increase that we have raised, since it's already in the budget for the hiring, employees for the hiring freeze?
That's the hiring freeze.
Only, then it looks like we have enough money now projected to be able to do the cost of living.
The only concern I've got there is what happens if that federal money that's been propping us up goes away and we actually do see a big drop, then next year we can't sustain it once we've given the raise. That's the reason. I want to do it. I'd like to be able to do it now and say, yeah, you can cover it without any problem. I think just waiting a few more months, you'll get a better picture, a better feel. And there's
Well,
no-
it's gonna be the picture's not gonna be as bleak as we're making it look, because the $600 stimulus check is really, in my opinion, is just a ploy to make sure that we increase minimum wage to $15 an hour. $15 an hour times 40 hours a week is $600. We're trying to get, some people in Washington are trying to make it look like this is the only thing that you can do to sustain people, is to give them a minimum wage of $15 an hour. That's what that's all about, and that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen. So I think the money's gonna be there, but I'm like you, I would rather have a little more experience under our belt to see that that's actually gonna happen. I really believe we have to wait until after this election. I would be willing to wait. I'd be willing to have this meeting again in the 1st of December and then say, okay, here's where we are, because this is what we're looking at.
Tony,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think about, we're talking about cost of living increase. We're talking about ways to spend every day. Seems to me like we need to take care of that first, not today, but we need to boost them up to a normal pay scale. And then talk about a cost of living increase. We need to get them on a level playing
Yeah,
field.
can't argue that, that's what the study said. Now, they didn't put a priority over the two, but I think that's reasonable.
But I think we probably need, as others have said here, we probably need to wait a few more months, 2 or 3 more months to, well, 3 more months to see what happens here.
Would you take that picture down?
Yes, please.
You were talking about $50 an hour, I thought that helped to reinforce, I'm sorry. Does that one help you anymore?
50%.
It's a little more balanced.
Fair and balanced. All right, I know it's a lot, and I know that I've been burying you every Friday with all this stuff, and it's a lot to go through and digest. But we've seen kind of where we're going. We still don't know where the end result is. I think we keep on talking about it. We know we want to do it. I think we've got a pretty good broad consensus. We'd like to do it, but we don't want to write a check that we can't cover through the bank account. Is that a fair assessment? Can we agree on that for Daddy?
I think Ken is right. We need to take care of our employees. We need to take care of our officers. We are not having the problems in Morristown that other places are having, and that's because of the way it's been handled locally. And it's a tough decision. It really is. The COLA, the 2% that you're talking about, that would be $350,000.
Yes.
So the difference in that and the salary increase, bringing it up with the pay scale is $20,000.
That's correct.
So.
Tony, I think Ken identified it very accurately. I would have to know the full everything we said.
Yeah, I think if you, I started saying if you're coming, nobody's coming. Nobody's happy. We don't want to be here. But we've got to make those decisions. Going back to that thing of rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work, making the tough decisions, this is one of them. We need to hold and see what we got, come back in December, look at the numbers, look at the situation, see what we can do, and then there is no reason in December, you still can't go back to July 1 if the numbers support it, but at least then you've got an idea, you're going to be able to make the payments for the next 6 months.
Whether it be your wife, your children, your students, or your employees, it's a lot easier to say, we can't afford that, than to buy that new car or whatever you do and say, we got to get rid of it, we can't afford it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems you're going to run into, if we get too overly optimistic and the bottom does fall out, you're going to end up coming back and having to lay people off. And that's going to be much more painful than the decision we're facing today. So, all right, are we comfortable, well, are we okay with where we are today, moving forward with unfreezing the frozen positions, beginning a plan to get that moving forward? We'll update you on the progress. They won't all be done at once. And we'll continue to talk about scheduling probably December if we get, it's always difficult to schedule meetings in December, but December, try and get something scheduled where we see what we've got, we've seen how things have gone at the national level, we can make an adjustment. We okay with that?
I think this is important enough to set that meeting in December.
Let me look at the calendar. What I'll do Tuesday is I'll float some days looking at what we got and see. I don't know how the holidays fall, and I think Thanksgiving's later in November, but let me do that, and we'll all look at our calendars together Tuesday night. All right, is that good?
I'm abstaining.
Well, speak up. I mean, that's what we're here for.
And the only reason is because I'd like to do it today.
Well, I think we all would like to do it today.
I just want to go on record with that.
Well, I mean, if you want to, we can put it on the agenda for a vote.
Oh, you know what the vote's going to be, so
Well, I mean-
we're good.
Okay.
Don't schedule a trip to see grandkids in December if you need you here.
Okay.
I will be here.
We are halfway through our morning session. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll set things up, get our next speaker up here, and we'll move forward.